Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think we have like 20 minutes, but I'll make sure that I'll do this like in 7 and open the floor for questions. I'm going to bring you a very high-level approach to what we do. And I'm going to walk you through, first of all, the reason why we are doing this today. And second of all, I'm going to, credit risk, it's very specific, very little, not a lot of people kind of understand it. So I'm going to do a parallel with self-driving cars so you understand conceptually what we do and what we're trying to achieve here, okay? But then I'll open the floor for questions if you will. I'm probably one of the few speakers today that is not nor an engineer or neither a data scientist. So I won't go as deep into the tech, but I probably can go deeper than you guys expect. So let me start with the story, right? Pedro and I, we are the founders of the company. And while we were working for a bank, we were doing some consultancy work for a bank, we soon realized that at the risk departments, the teams were basically doing 3 things, right? They were fetching data from the core systems, they were cleansing the data, doing the pre-processing, and then putting that into standard reports and giving that to senior managers, okay? So the problem with that is that they were really slow when it comes to deploying new products, right? If you want to put a new credit product out there, they'll take forever. Second of all, they provide no insights whatsoever to the management, right? They are just there to make sure that risk doesn't come in, but they are smart professionals that are able to do incredible things, but they just don't have the time, okay? So we weren't the only ones to notice that. The gentleman that you see, the 2 gentlemen that you see on your right, they are former executives of some of the largest banks in Europe, and they are also investors in James. And they've seen this in very large banks, but also in a portfolio of companies, of lending companies they have across Europe. So this is a problem. Trillions of dollars are mismanaged. That's the bottom line. And don't get me wrong, the people that work in these departments, they're probably the smartest people in a bank. Hardworking, super smart. The problem is that they are stuck with inadequate tools. Okay? Yeah, I know. EMS and showing SAS there, it's tough. I actually learned how to do some of these with SAS. So that's the problem that we're solving. So just for you to know what James is all about, our mission is to help these financial institutions to make better and faster credit decisions. And we help them to do that by adopting machine learning. The way I explain this, we check all the boxes. It's a big institution, a bank, right? You need to check all the boxes in IT, you check all the boxes in compliance, you check the boxes on the regulatory side of things. So that's what we do. So we enable the use of this technology within an enterprise environment, okay? So let me go through the analogy, okay? I'll use self-driving cars. Everyone kind of understands that. So driving is a good thing, right? Takes you from point A to point B faster, hopefully in safety. Like credit. Credit can be a good thing. Most people see credit as devil, but it's not. It's a good thing. It actually helps you reduce the gap between the poor and the rich. It helps you go through life much better if you don't have the means to, or if you were not born with the means. But things can go wrong. Don't ask. I found that online. The same with credit. Right? We've all seen this already, 2008. The analogy is the following. Once you have self-driving cars, it's like having Hamilton driving your car every day, right? The analogy with James is that if you have James, it's like every lender in the world can have a system as sophisticated as Capital One, right? Capital One is a US bank known to be very digital, data-driven. So that's the point. That's what we're trying to do. So trying to be just a little more specific. So a car needs to do the basic stuff, right? Accelerate, brake, turn. The same with the credit risk AI. We need to decide whether or not to give a loan, how much are you going to give to each person, what are the terms, basic stuff. Well, that's stage number 1 of a credit risk AI. Okay? Then we go for stage number 2. The car needs to be aware of its surroundings, right? The same with the credit risk AI. Okay? We need to do the statistical tests to make sure the models are robust, but we need to do it not every quarter, but all the time. And not one statistical test. Let's do them all. Let's make sure that we don't miss anything. Okay. And the third stage, when you get into this progress to have an AI, it's actually to be aware of the others. So the car needs to be aware not only of the surroundings, but be aware of the other cars on the street. The same with the credit risk AI. We need to be aware of what our team internally at the marketing department is doing, because suddenly they are targeting someone else. They just learned about data science and they are targeting someone else, and then suddenly the risk population is totally different. So you have a problem, or maybe you don't, but you need to monitor that. Not only the internal stakeholders are many within a bank, and this is complex, but also if you take in consideration the external stakeholders, competitors, regulators. So that's what the credit risk AI must do. So why is this difficult to do in credit risk? So first of all, there's a lot of regulations, right? If you want to maximize anything in e-commerce, you have no restrictions at all. We have a pile of files that we need to make sure we comply with. Okay? It's really tough to do that within this regulatory environment, especially because the regulatory environment is not static. It's always evolving. Then it's really hard to find the talent, right? I'm sure there's a lot of talented people here, but talent, it's not only about data science or not only about credit risk. Even internally, we have this. We have people that are super good data scientists, people that have many years of track record in risk. The secret sauce is when you combine both. And it's super hard to find that. If you try to find a data science today, it's hard, but you would be surprised that it's even harder to find someone with good track record in credit risk. So the combination of both is almost impossible. Okay? That's why we support the community with training and evolving everyone, because we understand that this is a problem, not only ours, but everyone's. And it's complex, especially in a bank, right? If you're working with banks, it's complex because there's many different core systems, a lot of legacy systems. It's not easy to connect them all, and if you don't have all the information, you're probably not doing the best call or the best decision. And then finally, it's really hard, it's actually not possible for you to use black boxes. So we had to develop something to make sure that these models are explainable, okay? Explainable, and if you think about, again, self-driving cars, the way that Google is going to explain how a self-driving car operates, it's totally different from the way that we explain how a credit risk AI operates and decides. Although the algorithms are the same. Just the way you need to explain that is different. You have different stakeholders, different concerns. So that's a big challenge, right? That's why it's not massively adopted in the industry till today. So finally, just for you to know, this is outdated. The results have been improving over time, but this is what you can get with the credit risk AI. You can get more people through the door without increasing your risk. You can get this same volume of loans, reducing your risk, and you can automate a lot of the process internally. It's not only the process of an underwriter saying yes or no to a loan, but also the regulatory processes. And that's where you save on operational costs. A lot of automation. Okay. So having said all this, open for questions. Sure. If you have one.
We got
Sure,
one.
go ahead.
There's one up there. Microphone.
One of the problems of using AI, right, is that you have the risk of disenfranchising large parts of the population because you learn that they are not very good at paying back their credit.
Sorry, I got almost everything, just the last few.
Okay, so the question is how do you plan to use AI without disenfranchising large parts of the population that typically are seen as having bigger risk, and AI is very good at identifying that?
Sure. Well, the process is very much similar to what you use in e-commerce, right? You do a lot of A/B testing. Just the way you do it, you need to be more conscious, right? It's not, oh, I lost a customer. It's actually someone lost a lot of money, right? Not the bank, but the person itself, right? Money today that they cannot pay back in the future, so it's actually alive there. But you actually do a lot of A/B testing, especially when people talk about alternative data. There's a lot of unknowns. The secret sauce to do that is to have a framework that allows you to do this A/B testing without jeopardizing the performance of your portfolio and having the right policies to make sure that consumers and small companies don't get, sorry for the expression, screwed in the process. Well, that's out of the scope that we do. We do advise banks to do some of these, but it's just advice. We don't touch on that. The policies there is that when you're trying, let's say that you have a threshold year, you say yes to ones, you say no to the others. If you're testing, right, if you're saying, let's test, let's see if I have good borrowers here, the type of policies that you should have for that test population is that you're not going to have as aggressive collections because you know in practice, you know that you weren't sure about them anyway, right? And you actually get a lot of value just from that test itself. So if I'm testing a population, I'm doing 5% of that population, I'm testing for the entire segment. If that goes wrong, you know, I make sure that the portfolio still performs well, and I know these population much better than anyone now. So let's take that as a cost, as a marketing cost, or as a learning cost, rather than a financial cost. That's what we advise banks to do, but this is a different mindset from the one that we find today in banks. I'm not sure that you still look like in the sides.
I understood what you're doing.
Okay.
Hi, João. Nice to meet you. I look forward to meet you in person. My name is Adelaide Leitão from Accenture. I have two questions for you, if possible.
Sure.
So, you start by saying that you were going to make a very high-level presentation, and I was wondering if you could give us a bit more detail of what sort of, so to say, what sort of artificial intelligence are you using that makes such a difference?
Sure.
The second question is more like a question related to the market. Since this is such a highly regulated market and used to function upon systems that are being in place for so many years, how is it that is going?
Okay. Let me start with the second one. That's actually where our monopoly hopefully will emerge. Most of what we do is online lending today. Although we work with some traditional banks, big banks, most of what we do today is on the online lending space. So let's say a big bank in Portugal wants to have an online lending product. Today what they usually do is they set aside a team and it works. So sometimes I don't need to integrate with the complexity of the systems, and that's a good thing. We are basically riding the wave of online lending because the risk and the way you assess the risk is different, right? In traditional lending, just the channel that brings you to the bank is a risk factor. So the online lending channel is also a different factor that no one knows how to deal with today. Then about the AI. So we use AI and machine learning techniques at 2-3 levels. So the first level is pre-processing the data, right? Especially if you're looking at transactions, you need to label them, you need to transform unstructured data into structured data. That's one side of things. Then the second moment is when you actually use an algorithm to make the predictions, right? So instead of using the traditional scorecards or logistic regressions, which is the industry standard these days, we use non-parametric algorithms, okay? But to be very blunt with you, sometimes we don't even need to do that. We just use those algorithms, we find the insights, and then we go back to the data, and we make sure that we produce a scorecard that is much better than the previous one. Okay. And then the third level, it's actually on the explainability itself. I know this is a little meta, but we use machine learning and AI techniques to build a model, and then we need to use machine learning and AI techniques to make sure we explain the model. So we use it at those levels, if you will. Very high level still, I know. Anyone else? Sure.
Hi, João. My name is Jessica. I'm just wondering, how do you ensure that it's a credit risk? How do you ensure that your algorithm has no judgment bias associated to it? Because that's a worry that I know a lot of people have when it comes to assigning, allowing people to have credit through these methods. So how do you ensure that the human bias doesn't actually go into your algorithm of the judgment bias?
That's a very good choice. I was hoping someone asked this. So one of the things about the explainability technology, there's many use cases for that technology. And one of the use cases is actually on the fair lending side. On the fair lending side, of course, if you have humans doing underwriting, they've been doing underwriting for the past 10 years, their bias is in the data, right away. So basically what we do is there are some standards, especially in the US, there are some standards from CFPB that you need to follow in terms of, you cannot discriminate based on race, gender, a few things like that. We do apply those. We actually contribute to that open library that CFPB has. And we use the explainability technology to go through the data and make sure that we explain, this is strange, right? You're probably discriminating here, or you're not giving loans in this district, things like that. But we take one step further. Once we spot something like that, the technology, the tool, the platform, it's able to actually correct that. Okay, for instance, you are expecting something to be monotonic, meaning the higher the better, for instance. If you see a spike, we allow you to get rid of that. But you actually need someone to look at the data because the spike can make sense or it may not. So yeah, but that's one of our focus areas, definitely. Focus areas, yeah. Thank you. I think we're done, right? Thank you.
Okay. João. Sorry, I have a question, but I don't know if you're gone yet.
There's still a question there? João?
Okay.
There's a question
So my question is...
It's right there.
Sure, I can see.
All right.
Go ahead.
Has there been a time where you mentioned that your responsibility is to advise the clients that, okay, lend this person, don't lend this person on your platform? Has there been a time where you made a decision for your clients that don't lend this person money, and they decided otherwise based on their own facts? And how did you feel with that? And did you have to bring their own bias or sentiments and build them into your model? Because that would be bringing, other than letting the machine decide 100%, that would be bringing like external factor, superiority, judgment, and all that. Do you bring those feedback back into your own model, or you just advise as you should and let them decide whatever they want to do?
Yes, I misexplained myself. When I said that we advise, we advise on how to use this technology for their benefit and for the benefit of the borrowers. We don't advise them on specific loans. We give predictions. Once we give the prediction, it's up to the bank to decide what to do. Okay, the bank is the one defining the threshold, whether or not to say yes or no. They are the ones defining the threshold. All the banks have these days, even with the traditional models, overrides, which is the scoring model is saying something, but then someone up in the ladder says, this is my Matthew, I want you to say yes. We cannot do anything about that. It's actually, the only thing that we do is we analyze that data after the fact, trying to reduce the number of overrides, increasing automation. But our responsibility ends when we give the prediction, and a lot of time we don't have visibility into whatever it's going on.
Because my question has to do with the overrides, like, okay, when they override, like, okay, this should go, this is a true positive, and you probably flagged it. Do you feed it back to your model? Like maybe in the case of next time, you probably let it go instead of stopping it. And
yeah, absolutely. And you've probably heard about it. I don't know if FeedZide's here today. For instance, FeedZide does that very well too. The difference between what they do and what we do is that for them, it takes like a minute or a phone call to understand if that was actually fraud or not. For us, it takes like 12 months to know if that is actually default or not. So we do feed it back, just the learning loop, it's much longer. Yeah, but we do.
João, thank you very much. Excellent.